This conference will now be recorded.
Hi everyone, I am Sumit and I welcome you all into this Mule video series. So many of you might be already knowing me. So I am an integration architect. So I work on different middleware technologies such as Oracle Fusion middleware, Delboomi, MuleSoft, Jitterbit, right? And many of you might have already attended my sessions or video sessions on either Oracle SOA, Delboomi, or OSB. So now this is a new initiative where I want to record around 30 or 30 plus videos on Mule basic concepts and want to make sure that the people who are planning to learn Mule can have a very streamlined set of videos which they can watch and can develop a good amount of knowledge on Mule, right? So this is my video number one. Before this video, I would expect people to know some basics of middleware such as XML, WSDL, namespaces, SOAP, REST, JSON, right? What are the basic integration patterns? What is the need of middleware? So there might be few people who may not have that idea. So need not to worry. You can watch my some prerequisite videos which are already there on YouTube, or else you can get in touch with me. I can share those prerequisite videos which will give you a fair amount of knowledge on the basic concepts related to middleware. So here we will straightforward start talking about the Mule concept, and this video would specifically focus on the installation of the studio which is called as AnyPoint Studio, that is pretty much required for all your development activities and the implementation activities. Apart from that, we will see a very simple example just to make you just to make sure that you get familiarized with the tool, you know the basic steps like how to build a Mule application, how to deploy it, how to observe the logs, and how to basically test it. So that is the intent from this video. So if you can see, here is a link, right? The moment you get launch this link on your browser, you will get this page from where you can download the AnyPoint Studio. So right now all these videos would focus on Mule 4, which is the latest runtime in the market, right? And you can come to this page and you can download the installable, right, by filling all these details. Now you all understand we are here to learn Mule. So Mule is basically an ESB, yeah. And what does ESB stands for? It stands for Enterprise Service Bus, right? So there are other uh, tools like WSO2, we have Oracle Service Bus. These all are Enterprise Service Bus. So it is very, very important for us all, for all of us to understand what is Enterprise Service Bus. Enterprise Service Bus is an architecture. Okay, this is an architecture which has been implemented by different vendors and they have come up with different products. Like Mule implemented it and Mule gave Mule ESB. WSO2 implemented it, they gave WSO2 ESB, which is now called as Enterprise Integrator. Similarly, Oracle implemented it and they called it as Oracle Service Bus, right? IBM implemented it and IBM called it as IBM Integration Bus. So it is an architecture which facilitates integration of disparate applications within or across enterprises. Right? So this is an architecture which would facilitate the integration of different applications within enterprise or outside enterprise in a loosely coupled manner, or okay, or we can say in an agile manner or in a decoupled manner. So we may have different applications such as, let's say, CRM, there might be some ERPs, there might be some custom applications, and eventually these different applications might need to exchange data to generate a value for the business, right? So now in like down the line, if I talk 20-25 years back, there was point to point integration which was very famous and which was mostly used across the enterprises to facilitate the data exchange, okay, between two or more applications. Now point to point integration is something like, as I've talked in my other sessions also, like let's say there is an application A and there is an application B which needs to exchange data. So these applications talk to each other directly with no intermediator involved. So in that case, what happens is, let's say there is an application A which might be written in Java, there might be an application B which might be, let's say, some Oracle database, or it might be written in .NET. Now, in order to facilitate this communication, there is a need of some custom code to be written at each application's end so that they can convert their request into a format which target system understands. So when the number of systems within an enterprise are less, this kind of integration mechanism looks pretty good. But when your enterprise size grows and you keep on adding the number of applications, writing custom code at each application's end becomes very difficult. And also here, these all applications are tightly coupled with each other, wherein if even single application fails, it impacts the complete architecture and it leads to a single point of failure. Now, like, people understood this challenge and that's why they came up with an ESB approach. So ESB is like an intermediator between the different applications, and it forms like a bus like structure. So ESB defines some set of rules and regulations, and these all applications which needs to be integrated need to connect with ESB. They need not to talk with each other directly. So any application within your enterprise, if it wants to exchange the data or wants to fetch data from some other party, what all it needs to do is it needs to establish a connectivity with the ESB, and ESB forms a bus-like structure which will facilitate your communication with the target systems. And in the process of doing so, it might do the protocol translation, it might do the data transformation, it might use some connectors, right? So that is how basically your ESB works. Okay, and same is the case with the Mule ESB. So Mule ESB is capable of doing the orchestrations, it is capable of doing the transformations, protocol translations, and it has got many out of the box connectors which in no time would allow you to connect with different on-premises and cloud-based applications. So the overhead of writing the custom code at each application can be taken away, and all these respective applications can just focus on the business functionality and need not to worry about the integration mechanism with other applications which are part of your enterprise, right? So ESB generally tends to follow or service oriented architecture where they will be exposing uh, the endpoints in the form of SOAP or REST based APIs. That is the case mostly, but there might be some batch based processes. So now here what we will understand is how Mule have implemented this, right? So Mule has some product called as AnyPoint Platform, right, which is a cloud based cloud hosted platform, which is a one stop shop for all the integration needs. From here you can basically even design your integrations, you can develop them, you can deploy them, you can manage them, you can monitor them, you can secure them. So all those things can be taken care from AnyPoint Platform, about which I am going to talk shortly in my coming videos. There is another thing called as AnyPoint Studio. Okay, so though AnyPoint Platform has the capabilities to allow you to implement your integrations, but those are still evolving and getting mature. Generally, it is recommended to use AnyPoint Studio for the implementation, right? So that's what we are going to cover here. So Mule has got AnyPoint Studio as an IDE, integrated development environment, which facilitates you to implement your integrations. And let me tell you, Mule is more famous because they have a widespread a jargon called as API led connectivity. Okay, so API is not something which has newly evolved in the market. It has been there within within IT industry for a long time, but now with the digitalization coming so frontline, this is gaining more market because the enterprises are getting open for the public. And so when we want to exchange data, when we want outside parties to to fetch the data from our ecosystem, then APIs are the best mechanism. So API stands for application programming interface. So if in a layman language I would say it is an interface on the top of your actual business logic which will allow the different systems or the third party applications to talk to your business, to talk to your application without knowing the complexity of the application, right? So for an example, If I take an example of TV, okay, there might be a lot of complex implementation which is there inside the television, but you remain abstracted from that, right? You need not to know what is the machinery inside television. You have got a remote. Leveraging that remote, you can just start interacting with the television. You can change the programs, you can put a timer and so on. So application programming interface is a mechanism which allows different third party applications to talk with a respective application without knowing the complexity of that application. As simple as that, right? So if I expose you some logic, right, such that you need not to know the complexity or the how I have written logic, how it is implemented. You just need to pass me a request and you get a response. If there is anything which facilitates that kind of communication, that is application programming interface. So application programming interface is another. It might be some Java interfaces. It might be some procedures. It might be some your Unix based routines or subroutines. It might be web services. Okay, and now when I say web services, like we have SOAP or REST based, right? Or we more commonly hear a term called, we may have REST based APIs. Okay, so when we are exchanging the data over the internet, REST based or HTTP based APIs are considered to be more convenient way, because HTTP is one protocol which is globally used when you are working or when you're exchanging the information on the web, right? But please do not understand or please do not misunderstand that API is only about REST. That is wrong understanding. Even SOAP is also like an API only. Okay, API is something which will facilitate you to expose your logic to some different third parties without exposing the complexity behind, right? So you just need to expose one specification. That might be in the form of a WSDL, that might be in the form of a RAML, that might be in the form of a WADL, that might be in the form of YAML, and the consumer party just need to understand that specification and they should be in a position to start interacting with you, right? So this whole phenomena would work more or less like a client server architecture. Whatever APIs you develop, okay, or whatever APIs you implement, that will be deployed on some runtime or on a server. So you are going to just expose the specification either in the form of a WSDL, either in the form of a RAML, or some simple plain English, and the consumer party will go through that specification and will start interacting with you without knowing the complexity underlying. So that is called as an API, right? But when we work on Mule, we work more with the web services. Okay, we work more with the APIs. So APIs is more or less like web service, but there are some additional capabilities we come up with, right? So when we were working with only plain web services, the management capabilities was missed. The security capabilities was not so robust. Then capturing the analytics was not so robust. So all those things have been packaged into a single product, and Mule has been launched, and that's why we hear a lot of jargons like API economy, API management, API led connectivity. Eventually the underlying technology is web service, but the point is that we have come up with a more lightweight solution in the form of REST based services which supports XML, JSON and other formats, which was not the case with the SOAP based web services, which was only restricted to XML. And now we have got a mechanism to know better about the consumers who are consuming my applications. We, like earlier there were different products for all these things, like in Oracle there was an Oracle API gateway. So those API gateways and proxies used to be separate product. For orchestration you had a separate product. Now all these things have been bundled into a single unit and Mule has been launched, and that is why it has gained a lot of market, because it sets a framework, it sets certain rules and regulations which you need to adhere to develop an API. And in the process of doing so you start following all the best practices, such as first you start with the API design where you develop the specifications of your API. Then you have a repository so that your APIs become discoverable, because reusability is a very important phenomenon when you're working with the APIs, then you have an implementation part, right, which you can do either via AnyPoint Studio, or even to some extent it can be done in the design center only, which is there in the MuleSoft, about which I'll be going to talk in a very elaborated manner. Then you have a provision for deploying your code either on premises or on cloud. Then this kind of things were there in earlier tools also, but now the good part is about the governance, which was a miss. So for example, I deployed then implementing different kinds of security like OAuth, JWT, basic authentication, rate limiting. These are out of the box available in Mule. Then capturing the API analytics, for example, how many requests have come to a particular API, right? What has been the traffic on a particular API, from which geographical locations my API is being hit, right? How is there any policy violation on my API? So all these things can be captured out of the box on MuleSoft. Apart from this, there are provisions where you can generate some out of the box alerts. When you see like your traffic is increasing, you can generate alerts. You have here we have microservices architecture where each applications has a different runtime, which was not case with the conventional or the traditional integration platform. So all these things have been a definitely plus with the MuleSoft, and they recommend a three-layered approach, where we have a concept of system APIs, process APIs, and experience APIs. So that concept can be implemented in any integration platform, but primarily Mule has come up with this concept. And when you have a huge enterprise where there are thousands and thousands of APIs, the real benefit of this three-layered approach can be experienced, right? So this was the just overall or a brief overview of the MuleSoft and its capabilities, right? And also I wanted to talk about little bit about the APIs. So here in these videos, we'll primarily focus on SOAP or REST-based APIs, right? And we'll see how do we secure it, how do we manage it, and we will see some unique features in MuleSoft like API auto discovery and all those stuff. But this video, as I mentioned, primarily would be focusing on showing you how to install the AnyPoint Studio and implement a simple REST-based API, right? I would show only implementation. I'm right now not showing the complete life cycle of an API, okay? So when we are developing a very simple code, kind of a POC, we may not do the design and all. We can start straight away, start with the implementation, okay? But in my coming videos, I'll show you the best practices and the overall life cycle. Now, as I told you, you can get the installable from here. So once you have the installable, you might get a zip file. Okay, so when you get a zip file, the name of the zip file might be too big. So if you're placing it in some directory, let's say you have a D directory, within that you might have some folder mule, then some folder, and then if you place a zip file, what happens is the path becomes too long, and when you start extracting it, you might get some errors that the path is too long, right? So it is always a good practice, first of all, to not keep this zip file which you get as a result of download, right, into some multiple subdirectories. Keep it in some parent directory only, and also you can just change the name of the zip. So for example, if the name of the zip is AnyPoint Studio with some random numbers .zip, just change it to mule.zip, so that when you extract it, the name of the file is not too long and you do not end up getting those issues, right? So once you do that, you might see something like this, the way you see in my machine. So I have done something similar. So I have got emule for AnyPoint Studio, and here are my some of the files, right? So here the most important thing is that when you start launching your AnyPoint Studio, you have to run this application file. And when you do it for the first time, sometimes you may get an error. And the primary reason for error is that your Java path might not be set correctly, right? So in order to do that, what you can do is you have to make sure you have JDK 1.8 installed in your machine, right? That is the prerequisite. Of course, you should have some, I think, 3 GB RAM, right? I believe all of you must be having it. That should not be a problem. But JDK 1.8 is very much required, and you should set the path in your environment variables for that. And if you still get an issue, so what you have to do is you have to add this entry over here, which is nothing but JDK path, and I'm pointing to the java w.exe file. So you have to ensure that this path is correctly set in your machine. So I will just keep it over here in the notepad. so that you don't face any issues while doing the setup. So once you set this and you start AnyPoint Studio, you will see something like this. Yeah. So this is the landing page of AnyPoint Studio. So you might get some blue screen. You can close that, where that is like the welcome page, and this is the home page where you may have a package explorer, and you are good to start with a MuleSoft, right? So what we do is we start with the Mule application straight away. So here we are kind of doing the implementation. So when we work with the APIs, there are different phases associated with, right? There is API design, there is API implementation, API deployment, API management, API monitoring, all those stuff. So here right now, I am doing an implementation. So I start with a simple Mule application, which will be exposed as a REST API. When I say REST, it's like HTTP protocol internally, right? So we will be developing an HTTP based service, right, which will receive the request from the outside world, and we are going to log some request, and we are going to return some response, right? So now when we work with the HTTP is a hypertext transfer protocol. It is a standard protocol which is used to exchange the information over internet, right? And it supports some kinds of methods which are also called as HTTP verbs. Like there is a get method which is used to fetch the data. There is a post method which is used to create the data. There is a delete method which is used to delete the data, and so on, right? So right now we may either use uh, get or post. So initially I'll start with a get. What I'll do is I'll start with file. I'll go to new and I'll start with a new Mule project, right? So the runtime which I'm using in these videos is 4.1.3, okay, which is okay. We may have, like, there are some bug fixes coming in the newer runtime, but more or less these will behave same. So I will start with Mule server 4.1.3, and in my future videos I might switch to the latest version, I think, which is 4.1.5. But that is anyhow not going to create a difference for the example which we are doing. And right now these all videos are being stored in some location, right? Or this application will be stored, this project will be stored in some default location. Yes. So if I want to point to some other location, I can do that, or else I can store into the default location also. So that is up to me, right? So I have created some workspace where all these data or the files will be stored. So I will start with the first example. Okay, so I will say video one underscore simple REST service. Yeah, and I'll hit finish. So this Mule project is a Mavenized project, right? So it will take some time, and so it takes some time. You will, when you start working, you will observe. So you will get a Mule project getting created. Yeah. So this is the directory structure. So you have SR source main Mule, right, where you will have all your flows. Source main Java for all your Java related stuff. Source main resources for holding all your resources. Then you have directories for holding your test related information. So there is a standard structure since it is a Mavenized project. So there is a standard directory structure for all your Mule applications. Then here you have the directories where you will have the all the dependencies related to the different components you're going to use, and there is a form.xml. Okay, since it is a Mavenized project, so you will have the information about the Maven project and the different dependencies and the plugin repositories, right? So by default you will have a flow. So we have a, so I would just correct it. By default we don't have a flow, we have a configuration file, right? So here it is more like a canvas where we drag and drop different components and we design our flows, right? And here there will be configuration XML, which is the corresponding XML that gets generated to the drag and drop you do on the canvas, right? So to start with a HTTP based service, you have a component called as HTTP listener, right? So now first of all you have to make sure that you should have the corresponding modules. So HTTP listener is part of HTTP module. So some modules come by default because these are the basic modules without which we may not proceed. And if you want to add further modules, there is an option called as add modules. You can just select that, and on the right hand side you might see there are different modules, right? So there are modules related to Workday, Salesforce, API kit, and so on. And if you do not find something here, then you have a ability that you can search those in Exchange also. Exchange is like a repository where you have the different connectors, ramls, or that is like a storehouse. Okay, that is like a marketplace where you will have all the reusable artifacts, right? So right now we want to work with the HTTP, right? So I select HTTP, and within HTTP these are the different operations you can perform. So I want to go with the listener. Listener will expose a service which will listen to the request from the outside world, and then you can perform different operations, right? So when I add this, by default a flow also gets added. Okay, so when I save stuff and I go to the corresponding configuration file, you can observe, so it is a XML based file which starts with a mule tag, and here you have a flow which by default gets added. So all the components eventually has to be either part of some flow or subflow, and you have an HTTP listener within that. There are some warnings because we have not completed the configuration, right? So we'll switch back to the message flow, and here we come to the listener, right? So we can just configure the listener over here, right? So connector configuration, so I'll hit the plus button and I'll do some configurations. So I will give the host as localhost, right? And some port number, so I can give the port number as, let's say, 9091, and some base path. So base path is something which will always be fixed with the API, and there will be some relative path, I mean, which is going to change. Okay, so now I don't want to give any base path. It is not mandatory to give base path. I will just hit OK, and here you can give your path. So let's say my path is first API. So since this is our first API, so I can give this. So this will help in forming the address or endpoint address for your API. Okay, so for example, in this case, I'm using HTTP listener. So HTTP protocol, host is localhost, port is 9091 slash first API. So this should be the path to reach out to your API once it is deployed, right? So here, after this, generally we call it as a base URI. Okay, so base URI and base path are one and the same thing. So here we have not chosen any base path or base API. So for example, it could be something like this. So here, when I keep on developing some new APIs, what I might do is I might keep this as same. So this becomes my base path, and these might keep on changing, right? So this is how base path or base URI, yeah, is different from your this path, right? So this path keeps on changing, whereas base path does not change. So right, so this is the complete endpoint URI, endpoint address to reach out to your API. Let me switch back to the AnyPoint Studio. So this path is the relative path, as I mentioned, right? So if you hover over this, it says relative path from the path, and the base URI will generally be the fixed path, right? So now here there are different MIME types you can set. Right now I'll not, so if you do not set anything, definitely it will have some default values. You can set some responses, you can go to the advanced tab where you can, set some methods which are allowed and all. So you can keep those kind of restrictions. A lot of configurations are possible, but right now I'll keep things as default, and I'll just come back here, save everything, and I will just close the listener, and I'll come to the file. So here I still get a warning because the path part was not saved. I will just save it once again, and I will say it first API. Yeah. So right now there are no warnings. So you have got a listener configured which is going to listen for the request coming from the outside world on the port number 90 or 91, which is okay. And after that, I want to log the request, what is going to come from the user, right? So now for that, I can have a logger. Yeah. So logger falls into the core module. Okay, some components which will help you to do the manipulations, logging will fall into the core module. So here you can log some message, right? So if you want to log some custom message, for example, I can log like this: hi, this is my first API. Okay, or else if you want to log the request which is coming from the user, right? So that request by default gets mapped to the Mule event. So in order to invoke any component, you need Mule event. So Mule event is the entity which is going to traverse from one connector to another components and so on in any Mule flow. So within Mule event, there are Mule variables. I'm going to talk about all these in a very detailed manner. I'm just trying to give you an idea over here. So right now I'm going to develop an API which supports get method. So I might not be passing any query parameters. So get method anyhow does not support any body. It only way to send out some requests is via query parameters, or uh, you may have something in the, like in the URL eventually. So you cannot have anything outside URL to send the request. So there is something called as query parameter or URI parameter. That is the only way you can send the request. So right now let's assume I'm going to simply hit the endpoint, which will look more or less like this. So I'm not sending anything in the request, so that's why I'm just logging some dummy message, and now I want to return some response. So for that you have an option called a set payload, where you can set your own payload, whatever you want. So I just want to keep some plain text. Hi, this is my first API. Yeah, as simple as that. So you could keep some XML content or JSON content also, but right now I want to keep it really simple. So I have got a Mule project where I am configuring one REST-based service that is going to log the some dummy message and is going to return some hard-coded response with the help of set payload component, right? Now once we are done with this, we need, I have a tendency to close everything, because if something is not saved, you can easily identify it. You can select your project, right click, and you have an option run as Mule application. Okay, so now once you have your AnyPoint Studio installed, there will be a Mule runtime internally embedded on this. So right now I'm using Mule 4.1.3. So right now I want to deploy this on a Mule runtime. So you are saying you get a warning, you're already running a instance of Mule embedded runtime. Okay, because maybe when I started recording this video, I was already running console. This, you go to window, there is show view, and from here you can find the shortcuts, and also you can launch all these tabs, right? So right now I'll stop the runtime. Yeah, because there was some application. I'll stop the runtime and I will kind of redeploy it. I will deploy it so that I can test it out. So I will right click again, run as Mule application. So here is the console where you can see the logs. So first, Maven related scripts get executed. It gets all the dependencies and make sure that everything which is a prerequisite for this application is in place, and then starts a Mule container and so on and on. So it takes some time. So it is initializing the domain, and now within some seconds we should see our application getting deployed successfully in case there are no errors. So you can see here, you will see a message like this which says your application is deployed successfully. Right now you're good to go with the testing part, right? And how do you reach out to your application? You know very well, so you have got an address for that. So now since it is a REST-based service, you can test it directly from your browser also, or else you can install some of the tools like Soap, Soap UI, Postman, or Advanced REST Client. Generally, Postman is more commonly used tool among all. So for Postman, you can either install it, or else there is a plugin which gets embedded with your Google Chrome, right? So even you can add that plugin. So if you want that, just write Postman Google Chrome app, something like that, and you will, or Google Chrome plugin, so it will be little easier. So this is how your Postman looks, right? So first of all, I'm going to test it on the browser itself. So I'll get the endpoint, right? So I will remove the API part because I haven't set any base path, right? There was only relative path. And let's go ahead on the browser, open a new tab and paste this. So you see, you get a message, hi, this is my first API. This message is coming because you had used the set payload and you hard coded some value. Similarly, when you go to the logs, here you might see that some message is getting printed. Yeah, this message is getting printed because you had logged the same stuff, right? So you had logged, so you had done two activities. If you go back to your flow, you were logging some message, hi, this is my first API. That's why in the console under the logs you would see a message gets printed, hi, this is my first API. Just hold on, let me just expand it. Here you can see, hi, this is my first API. And then you had used set payload, which is ensuring that the similar message is returned, right? So this is how you develop your first API. Now we could very well test it in the Postman also. So I'll go to the Postman. Yeah, so I'll open a new tab and I will enter the URL. So right now you can understand here in the get method, we are using get method. We do not have the provision to set body, but we can definitely send some parameters, which I'm not doing right now. I will just hit the send button and here you get something in result. Hi, this is my first API. So this is how you develop your very simple service in the MuleSoft. So that's all from my side for this video. Stay tuned with me for more videos where we'll talk about the more topics on MuleSoft. Thank you for watching this video and let's catch up in video number 2. Thank you.